Hello folks, Halcylion here. You may have heard this old saying, you've made your bed, now lie in it. Well, I spent 4 years making this bed, having developed my bartering skill to the degree where I'm now able to convince lords into relinquishing their lands to me, in exchange for my cold, hard gold. Everything has a price, including your fiefdoms, my dear lords. We spent the last 9 episodes grinding, and now that we've unlocked the perk, this is where the fun begins. Welcome to the 10th episode of Trader Stories. As I've said over and over, the only reason we trade is to obtain what I like to call the key to the empire, or the antepenultimate perk in our merchant skill. The money we get is nice, but it's more of a fringe benefit of trading. This perk allows you to invest your money into land and establish your hegemony peacefully, before deciding what kind of emperor you would like to be. But cities are expensive nowadays, and the money we earn from commerce is often not enough to afford an entire city, and as such, today I have several goals. Ultimately, I want to buy a town, preferably Seonon. There's many reasons why I prefer this town over any others, but for now I'll give you just one. It has 4 bound villages instead of the usual 3. To do that, however, I will need to raise a lot of capital. I currently only have 1 million, and I'm probably going to need 3 to 5 million to obtain this town, so that is goal number 2. The fastest way to get all that money is by heading into the forge, so let's not waste any more time. So far, I've used the wisdom of other blacksmiths and smelted pugios into steel and fine steel, but not too long ago a master smith taught me that it's more effective to purchase southern throwing daggers from Botanian towns and smelt those instead. I have no idea what southern weapons are sold in a northern town, but I don't get paid to ask such silly questions. I just followed the advice and found out that these weapons are more plentiful, cheaper, and yield more resources than pugios, so overall, that was solid advice. Throughout today's adventure, I've done a lot of smithing, and I mean a lot. I won't talk about it too much though, but I'll still tell you how I've done it. At first, I crafted a couple of javelins, but those require fine steel, and even though I can always obtain this material from the aforementioned southern daggers, it's better if I can put my other, simpler materials to use. Luckily, one of my expensive weapon designs is based on wrought iron, which I have a lot of. So I crafted lots of pointed falchions, but I didn't do it solo. My beautiful wife, Chalia, gave me a hand. Together we made charcoal, smelted daggers, and crafted those swords. But because she's not very skilled at smithing, her swords ended up being worse than mine. So I needed a way to differentiate the two. The swords I crafted were named Massive Falchions, and her variants were named Botched Falchions. If you want to make lots of money fast, it's best to have all companions in your party and do smithing. With my wife's help, instead of crafting 3 swords per day, we crafted 6. If I had all my other companions with me, we could have crafted 24 of these swords in a single day, but alas, they're all leading their caravans, making me a measly 4,000 dinars every day, and most importantly, bringing fame to my clan. As we were smithing falchions, I suddenly learned how to craft my favorite weapon design, a long falx blade. It's an amazing weapon, and I will eventually make one for personal use, but the first one I'm smithing will be sold for profit. But weapon crafting is just the first step in my quest for loads of money. The second step is actually finding buyers. I first tried selling my weapons to cities I would visit. Each transaction was different, but if I could merge them all into one big sale, it went a little like this. I would buy whatever cheap goods were available in town, sell my weapons and empty a city's treasury, and because they still needed to pay for my sword, I'd buy out whatever weapons and armor they had in stock until the town was left with a little under 1,000. That's how I knew I'd get my money's worth on the weapons I sold. I would then rent a hotel room, rest and recover my stamina so I could go back to forging more swords. As I was traveling from town to town, I would stop by every village in between, trying to look for mercenaries to hire into my army. I don't particularly need a lot of people right now, but I have to prepare for any contingency. Maybe one of the factions is about to get jelly about my growing wealth and power, and declare war on my clan. Whatever the case, I have to be ready. But each town I visited only had 20 to 50,000 dinars, and even smithing is a slow way of making money when all you can do is sell 1 sword into each town. I needed something faster. Did you know you can also sell your crafted weapons to lords? I did, but I was too lazy to track them down, and I had to overcome my laziness and run after Lucian of Botania and try to see how much stuff he'd buy from me. Why Lucian, you may wonder? Well, this feller is a clan leader. Clan leaders are land owners and their subjects pay them heavy taxes, which means they have a lot of money to offer for my swords. He was last spotted near Epikrotea, and if I remember correctly, the Botanians were at war with the current owners of that town, the Northern Empire. With a new purpose, I went to Epic Town and noticed that Mekalovea Castle was under siege by a Botanian army under the command of Prindor. I have a feeling Lucian is riding with the army, and while in the army, he cannot be approached. I could talk to the commander, but he was a bit busy leading the siege, you see, so all I could do was wait for them to finish. To their dismay, an imperial army was amassing near the castle, and eventually they overran Prindor's army, who fought like hell to escape the lion's jaws. No such luck. The army tried to retreat 3 times, but it was too slow and disorganized to actually escape from the smaller imperial parties. The Botanians were doomed, until, in a twist of fate, a small Vlandian army rode to their defense and pushed the imps back, defeating all their forces. At the end of the battle, both barbarian armies had 119 soldiers left standing. It was at that time I stopped resting in town and rode forth to meet Prindor and negotiate a deal. But before making a transaction, I wanted to know how much he values his 2 castles. About 500,000 each, more or less. I don't really care about castles right now, so I told Prindor to put all his money on the table, and in exchange, I gave him 5 of my crafted weapons and a lot of equipment I bought from towns. If we ignore the rest of the stuff, that's about 50,000 for each weapon, which are worth 120k. So yeah, lords will pay you less than half of your weapon's worth. But think about it like this. So do towns. Yeah, a town also lets you buy stuff to complete the price from 50k to 120k, but when you resell what you bought, it's sold for less than half of what you paid for it. Add that to the fact that each town can only buy 1 weapon at a time, and you'll come to the conclusion that supplying weapons to lords is the fastest money-making method on the continent. At least for now. This was only the first time I've done it. With this sale completed, I was now sitting comfortably with 1.61 million dinars in my account. In just a few days, because I focused on smithing, I earned 400k. But I still had some weapons to sell, so I ran after the Vlandian savior, Aldrich. He is the lord of Provend, Omor, and Drapand Castle. But he only has 32,000, so I can't sell him any of my weapons. I could, however, try to see how much he's asking for one of these towns. Interesting, he values Omor at 1.5 million dinars. I could take the offer and achieve my ultimate goal right now. How much for Prevent though? All my money and my weapons and my horses, and it's still not enough. Close, but no cigar. Well, now's the time to make a pun in my ancestral language. Numa Omor dupa Omor. That means I'm not particularly thrilled for Omor. That is not the literal translation. That's the meaning of the phrase. It is a nice town, bound to a couple of food-producing villages, but it doesn't even compare to a town like Seonon. At the very least, it will make a nice temporary base where I can station my troops, stable my horses, and stash my unnecessary resources. So you know what, Lord Aldrich? We have a deal. You are now a millionaire, and I am now a landowner. Damn, I love being rich. Well, not so rich anymore, I'm down to 85k, but you know, I own the means of production, so I can get my money back in no time by just heading into the forge of my own town. I still got plenty of materials just begging to be turned into millions. In addition to that, my caravans are making profit on a daily basis. Well, that's it. My ultimate goal has been achieved. In just 11 days after we unlocked the perk, I'm already lord of my own city, and I didn't even have to bend over for any of these kings and become their vassal. Vassalage would have been a faster way to fiefdom, but I value my independence. Before I retire, however, I also need my bank account replenished to 1 million, so let's get to work. More weapons need to be crafted. It would seem all this smithing leveled me up. Where should I put the point? Maxing out stewardship is a good idea, but I think I'll leave that for later. Let's actually put a focus point into tactics. The second perk, Tactical Superiority, increases the damage dealt by my soldiers in battles and sieges, and that sounds pretty good. After that, I decided to reorganize my warband, leaving the inexperienced troops in my town's garrison and taking the veterans with me. This is just one of the perks to owning a fief. You can swap your troops and tweak your army composition to fit your needs. The second benefit of owning a town is having access to its stash. You see, I currently have more horses than I have soldiers, and because of the big herd, my party's movement speed is lower than it should be. So I shall stable some of my horses and mules here, and when my army grows, I'll take them back. And because my carry capacity is lower, I'll also stash a lot of resources here. Excess food, clay, flax, and whatever else I cannot carry with me. For now, I'm done with trading. I may still do it from time to time if an opportunity presents itself, but I need to craft more weapons and eventually assemble a huge army. The town also has a dungeon where I can throw prisoners of war if I choose to recruit them instead of ransoming them in the tavern. Speaking of which, there's a lord in my dungeon. I could just set him free, but that doesn't improve any relations, so I'll just sell him to the ransom broker for 1,000 dinars. Profits! Anyway, to get the most out of your newly acquired town, you have to dump money into its treasury and prioritize projects you would like to build. One such project allows you to station more troops in the garrison, but here's the thing. If you don't have enough food and your soldiers are malnourished, they are going to defect from the garrison, and you don't want that, especially if you have elites. Luckily, towns rarely have issues with their food stocks since they can always be supplied by traveling caravans, and if you see the food stores getting depleted, you can restock them out of your own pocket. Castles don't have a marketplace and they have to rely on their bound villages or on their gardens to keep the garrison fed, and oftentimes not even that is enough. A town is truly the superior choice when it comes to building your army. Anyway, let's skip the instructions, this is not one of my guides. When I was done crafting a few more swords, I decided to visit my villages and see what kind of troops we can recruit. Nothing special, just your run-of-the-mill volunteers. On my way back to town, I did notice something peculiar. A Khuzaite army, led by Hurunag, with a constantly dwindling soldier count. That usually indicates that the army is starving, and it is about to disband. I have an idea, since these guys are clearly desperate for food, why don't I sell them my swords? Before I do that, I am curious how much this fellow values his fiefs. Whoa, what the fuck? For his shitty castle, this guy asks for my city and 93,000 dinars on top of it. Get out of here with this bullshit, man. If I ever want your castle, I'll take it by force. You know what, let's just stick to being an arms dealer. You give me your money and I will give you 5 Halcylions. There, now I am at nearly 300k and his army is starving. And because he's bankrupt, he cannot afford to buy any food. This was one of the worst trade deals he could have taken. But it works for me, as I've said. I need to take the Khuzaites down, and if I can bankrupt their lords before laying waste to their lands, well, that would be perfect. After that deal, I headed back into town and spent a few more days smithing swords and resting at the tavern, and after a while it was time to find a new buyer for my Halcylions. I first stopped in Balgard, where temptation led me to purchase a lot of cheap wares worth 36,000, but I wasn't going to spend that money. What am I, nuts? No, I actually sold one of the botched Halcylions I had lying around and I got my money back, plus all the funds the town had, plus a couple of axes which I would sell later on. But because I was overburdened by all I've purchased, I had to stash some of my items back home. Now that I can move again, let's try to find another buyer for my hyper expensive swords. I need a landowner that is close. Their third king of the Vlandians is somewhere around Epikrotea, which is a stone's throw away. Let's meet him and have a chat. Unfortunately, I grossly overestimated the king's wealth. He can't even buy one of my swords with his pathetic bank account. Maybe Lukon, ruler of the North Empire, can take some of these off my hands. Hell yes, he absolutely can. He paid 270,000 for 6 of my swords. That's great. Considering the fact that it takes me 1 day to craft 6 swords, I could potentially earn 270,000 dinars every single day, as long as I can find buyers. But we need to forge more swords, you know the drill. Rest, smelt, forge, repeat. But I need a reliable buyer, a lord with a lot of fucking money, someone who has a lot of land. Aha, I need to make a deal with Monchug, leader of the Khuzaites. He's been on a warpath ever since I was doing my first trades, and he's a big boy now, ruling almost half the continent. I bet he can afford to buy whatever I have to offer. Heading east is a good first step to meeting this feller, so I shall set course for Saneopa. In there we can rest and forge for days on end until we have enough swords for sale. But I didn't have time to forge any more swords because shortly after I arrived, guess who shows up? Monchug with 1,000 men ready to take this city. Well, I have an idea. 2 actually. I already have 9 Halcylions for sale and I could sell them to Monchug right now. 324,000. not bad. Lucon's rates were better, but maybe the reason I'm getting less than 50k per sword is because most of these are botched Falchions and they are below their optimal value. Still, 324k in one go is way more money than anything else can earn you. There's only one thing that can rival smithing: selling freshly captured castles or towns to people like Monchug who are just casually carrying 2.64 million dinars. The second idea I got was to prepare to trade some goods with Saneopa after the siege was lifted. I don't need the money or the profit, but I want to see if I can get some more trading experience. I could use the other two trade perks, but selling to sieged towns is my only option to raise my skill. So we gotta go resupply from towns that are close by. I first went to Argoron to buy some cheap fish and not much else. And then I went to Umbrella, one of the few supply towns in the region, where, to my surprise, I only spent 12k. Oh, and just a side note, I'm back at 1 million. I do miss the days when I was just a simple goods trader, but that's nowhere close as profitable as smithing. Still, trading was a necessary step in order to be able to invest all this money into fiefs, otherwise I'd just have been an asshole with a lot of money and nothing to spend it on. With a full inventory, it's time to return to Saneopa and wait for the siege to end. Huh, look at this, 5,000 per day earned from my investments. Not too shabby, but I would love to bring this number to 10k or even more. While waiting, I noticed that Monchug was starting to lose his men, but the assault on the city hasn't even started. I think his army is starving and they'll be forced to lift the siege soon. He lost nearly 100 men to starvation. They didn't necessarily die, but they're malnourished and in no condition to fight. Not that I care. The siege is lifted and now I can make some profit. 25,000 and a skill point, how nice. Just like the good old days. But now I have another duty, to go in the forge and make more weapons. This would go much faster if I hired another companion in my clan. After all, I have an available slot. But I want to recruit an engineer and I haven't found any just yet. Oh well, I'll do what I can with whatever I have. Me and the wife sweating at the forge together. Can you picture anything more romantic? We spent the next 6 days just forging swords for Monchug and resting to get our strength back, and once that was done, we inquired about the Khan's whereabouts and chased after his army, which was not too far from here, in the vicinity of Vealos. So I gave chase, and in a few moments I spotted the army heading back to Saneopa for round 2. But I won't let Monchug pass by without buying my swords. Wait, what the hell? He's 1 million dinars richer than he was after I sold him my swords. How the hell did he earn 1 million in a week? Taxes? Counterfeiting? Selling my weapons on the black market for full price? I hope it's not the last one, otherwise my smithing efforts will make Monchug a richer man than me, and if that's the case, there's only one thing I can do to ensure he's no longer the most powerful person in Calradia. On the other hand, letting him live could work well in my favor. After he conquers all the other kingdoms and the continent is all teal, all I have to do to take it for myself is fight one enemy. But those are again delusions of grandeur. I'd much rather retire and leave the rest of my days in peace within the walls of my own city. Anyway, we ain't there yet, so let's return to the present. Let's see, how much does he ask for the city of Umbrella? 800k, that is quite affordable considering how good the city is, but I am not interested just yet. What I am interested in is selling all these swords I crafted in the past week. I think I could score 1 million dinars for all of them. 23 falchions, a few cheaper swords and 2 helmets earned me over 1 million dinars from Monchug's treasury. This is the largest sale I've ever done in my entire career as a trader, or rather, an arms dealer. Whoever said that smithing is the most profitable activity in Calradia wasn't wrong, but it's so much better when you combine it with trading, ain't it? I am now sitting nicely at 2.15 million dinars, ready to make more moves. My travels took me back to Balgard, where I met a man who knows a lot of stuff, most notably engineering, and he offered to sell his services to me in exchange for 2,500 dinars. There's lots of things this dude guy can do for me. He can be a third man to craft swords, he can build my siege engines when I start my conquest, and in the meantime he can act as a governor in my city and use his engineering prowess to improve the speed with which projects are built. I was also met with a pitiful sight, Raganvand, prince of the Sturgians, who was wandering throughout the land that was once his. And I took pity on the wretch and made a small donation to his cause. Maybe this would be enough to put him on his feet and have him cause troubles for the nomads. Probably not. Anyway, with a solid base and 2 million dinars in the bank, it's time to build my army. One way to do this is by going from village to village, hiring volunteers and chasing down bandit parties to give your recruits some combat experience. Evolve them into real warriors. but I can use my trade skill to obtain an elite army much faster. As a Battanian boy, I heard the stories of the legendary Fian champions and how they could put an arrow into an imp's eye from 300 meters, and now that I am a grown man, it's time to put the legend to the test. Granted, not all highborn warriors survive their training to become Fian champions, but they outclass any other archer in Calradia, so they're going to form the core of my army. Now, I could go to Meladir of Remtoil and ask him to let me hire highborns, but after I failed to train his stupid peasants, he kind of hates my guts and will take a lot of missions to get back on friendly terms with him. We need a better way to obtain our fians, but to do that, I'll need to buy a castle. What about Flintolg Castle? It belongs to Lucian, so let's track him down. There he is, the Lord of Flintolg Castle and Seonon. I would very much like to call Seonon my home, but it's probably way above my pay grade. 174 million? You mean this town actually fits in my budget? That's nice, but I cannot buy it now because I left half my army back in Omor, so I have an idea. I'm not making a deal with Lucian right now. Let's actually try to buy a random Battanian castle real quick, bring my troops in here, and then, well, you'll see. Ergeon was patrolling with his huge army around here on a recruiting spree, and in my experience, armies are led only by clan leaders. As I've said earlier, clan leaders are also landowners, so let's see what fiefs he's got. Remtoil Castle. It's positioned right next to Seonon, so I think I'll keep this one as a secondary fortification to extend my army. And it only cost 300k? Well, Ergeon, we have a deal. As soon as I bought the castle, I paid it a visit, deposited some money into its treasury, and organized the projects. The gardens take priority since I will need to keep the garrison well fed. Then I went back to Omor to recover items from my stash and take the soldiers to their new home. First I took the veterans, the tier 4 and above troops, stationed them in the castle, and then I returned for a bunch of mercenaries that I hired earlier in my travels. Armed traders and such. They're decent fighters, but they will never get better at their job. The thing I love most about mercenaries is how disposable they are. Say I have an army of Battanian Fians and I lose half of them. That is painful because I worked for nearly 5 years to be able to recruit them in my army. And they're hard to replace, but if I lose a bunch of mercs, I'll find twice as many in the next tavern I visit. Anyway, with my soldiers safely escorted out of Omor, it is time to search for Lucian once more and exchange my town for Seonon. Now, where is that lad? In Maronath, it would seem. Nope, nuh-uh. Oh, he might actually be in that huge army led by Ergeon doing fuck all. Well, all I can do is follow the army and wait for an opportunity for Lucian to separate from it. As I was waiting for my audience with that lord, I encountered 53 mountain bandits, and because I was bored, I decided to play with them. Well, my archers had all the fun. I then noticed the army was heading for Lagetta, so I decided to stop wasting time following them around and ride in town before they do. And while I wait for them, I could rest and practice my smithing. I could always use more money. I'd say this is a good way to pass the time. Eventually the army stopped in town, and now I had the opportunity to head into the Lord's Hall and have an audience with my boy Lucian. Seonon, 1.75 million. I'd gladly pay this amount right now to get that town, but I don't much care for Omor at the moment, so I exchanged my town for Seonon. But the two are not equal. I would have to pay another $500,000 to get my favorite town. Thinking outside the box, I just gave Lucian a bunch of crafted swords and some pieces of armor I bought earlier. Apparently, that was good enough and we had a deal. Seonon, finally mine. This is a good town where I can look down on the continent I am about to dominate, and it shall be the centerpiece for my global conquest. My capital. But I would need to assemble a legendary army before I can do all that, and as I've previously said, the trade skill allows me to do so very quickly. Now you may wonder, how could I get lots of highborn archers in my army using the trade skill? Well, that's easy. I have a lot of money, right? All that weapons trading has worked well for me. And I've also got a nice perk from all the trading I've done over the course of 4 years. So what do I do now? Simple. First of all, I'll have a chat with Caladog and buy Uthalaim Castle from him. Only 218k, that's one of the cheapest forts I've ever seen. But as long as I have swords, I won't sacrifice my money. Step 2 is to go to Seonon and garrison half my troops over there. When Seonon is full, I'll go to Remtoil instead. After this, I ride to Uthalaim Castle, extract the elite warriors from the garrison and into my army, and I take them back home. Rinse and repeat that until the castle is garrisoned by basic units. I then try to find another lord to exchange my old empty castle with a new one whose garrison is filled to the brim with elite soldiers. Sounds complicated, but it isn't, trust me. On my way to my new home, I ran across a group of 79 looters and how could I resist? When I see that many looters, I have the impulse to crush them. I personally only managed to get one kill because my firing squad completely wiped the rest of them out. And these are just some basic archers, I don't have my fians yet. After that fight, I went back to Remtoil and Seonon, invested into some city project, stationed half my army, and then I went to Uthalaim to get the elite soldiers out of there and into my city. There weren't a lot of veterans here, that's probably why this castle was so cheap, but I got about 20 fians and several other veterans which were taken to Seonon. In here, I did commit a serious error. I stationed more people than the garrison allowed, and I only realized that when I was alerted that 3 soldiers have deserted. I was under the impression that a city can house a lot more soldiers, but the projects increasing the garrison capacity were not built yet. I'll have to be more careful in the future, I don't want my fians deserting because they're overcrowded. So I rode back there as fast as I could and fixed the problem. There isn't much I've done after this. It was time to switch the empty castle with another one and get the elite soldiers into my army, so I rode after another lord all the way back to Amor. Aradwir, lord of Druimore Castle, soon to be lord of Uthelaim Castle after the exchange. But the 2 castles are nowhere close in value, so I had to pay him an additional 400k, which is probably a larger amount of money than this lad has ever seen in his entire life. But when I got to the castle, I realized that there were a grand total of 8 Battanian archers stationed in there and a handful of other veterans. Well, I got scammed, but I like to consider every failure a lesson. And the lesson in this is to take a look at a castle's garrison before spending 400k on that property. Well, not much to do here, let's see the villages. Nice, I got another highborn from Tormelina. But I need to exchange this castle with another, not before inspecting my future purchases. So I rode to Pendrake Castle and paid really close attention to what troops are stationed in its garrison. 7 heroes, 17 highborns, 1 fian, and in addition to those archers there were several other elite infantrymen such as the Oathsworn or Wildlings. Not bad, when I find the owner I'll get this castle. What about the next fort, Flintolg? 15 highborns, 8 heroes, 6 fians, also not bad. And it looks like Lucian is the owner. I couldn't get Pendrake, the owner was too far away, but apparently Lucian is close. Let's barter with him and get his castle. He's still riding with a huge army that isn't doing anything, so you know the drill. Time to wait. It didn't take long for the army to disband and Lucian was now isolated and approachable, so let's go over there and make a deal. Flintolk Castle is valued at 600k, and I paid a total of 700k for Druimore. But now that its garrison is lacking several fighters, it's probably valued much less than before. Damn, Lucian is fleecing me, I gotta pay him 130k in addition to exchanging Druimore Castle, but you know what? I can afford it and it's worth it. Well, you already know what happened. I went to Flintolg, got the elites, took them to Remtoil because Seonon is crowded, and just to see if my efforts were worth it, I took all the Battanian archers with me and left everyone else home. Then we met this group of 33 looters and decided to do some target practice on them. Well, there's not much I can say about the fight. They're looters with rusty tools and just the clothes on their back. They have no chance against real warriors, let alone elite archers. In 15 seconds after shouting "Open fire", all these looters met their creator. But while we're at it, just look at how glorious this archer line looks. Is there a better method of obtaining an elite army in such a short time? I mean, yeah, you could do favor for village leaders and townsmen, and slowly increase the number of highborns you can hire, but I think my method of castle acquisition and exchange is the best way to quickly build such an army. And it is all because we took the time to trade, develop the skill and obtain the perk that makes this all possible. You can always obtain riches and loot and castle through conquest, but trade allows you to get the most precious treasure of all. Competent people to fight in your army. Real soldiers that have your back against all odds. And you can expect to see them in action when I publish my corporate reports. But this was not all. Trader Stories still has 1 episode left before we make that transition, and in that episode, I will complete the setup and establish my corporation. Or retire. My only fear about the future is that I will be forced to discard my honor and remove all pretenders to the throne by force. Hopefully it won't come to that, but nobody can predict the future. I can only predict the next 10 seconds where I have to say that this was all I had for today. Thank you for watching and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.